All right. Okay, yeah, I think you can hear me. My name is Adam Sessler. I am a 16-year now refugee of the gaming press. I now am president of TheoryHead Incorporated. It's a one-man consultancy firm. But this was quite a treat to get to come to something like this. As someone who started out in 1998, where the most exciting thing out there was sort of, the graphics acceleration of a 3D FX card, the idea that, only in this short period of time that we're actually discussing the idea of having EEG sensors to help direct a gaming experience is something I could have never anticipated, but I'm more than happy to embrace. And I think as we've seen with kind of the first forays into this new wave of interactivity with games, be it with the Wii, with the Kinect, with the PlayStation Move, that we all sort of understand what the technology is, but there's still those challenges ahead about how to really sort of embrace it and find a new way of interaction rather than just kind of amplifying or accessorizing an existing video game gameplay format. And I think we have an excellent panel right here to help really explore both the wonderful opportunities and those challenges. So I'm going to start with the gentleman right here to my left. This is Lat Ware, CEO and founder of the greatest name I have ever heard of a company, Throw Trucks with Your Mind. I pointed out to him that if he just called it Throw Trucks with Your Hands, I would already be up and paying attention, but no, he added in the mind there as well. So a round of applause for Lat. Also joining us is Stanley Yang, the CEO of Neurosky. Stanley. And we have Arye Barnehama. I did it right, yes. The CEO of Melon. And last but not least, Steve Castelloti, the CEO of Puzzlebox. So this is our panel, and as we're about to find out, the diversity in what they're doing cannot be understated. So if all you guys briefly could explain sort of what your company is and what your approach is to neurogaming, that would be great. And Lat, let's start with you.
Well, my company is Crooked Tree Studios, and we approach neurogaming with the idea of making a violent, competitive meditation trainer.
Oh, I love that. And Stanley, Neurosky.
And Neurosky basically is a biosensing company. We build hardware and harnesses wearable technology on the head, on the wrist, and I wore everything I could possibly do wear today to show everybody, and I'll go into them later. And we provide these platforms for game developers, and together we provide a solution or a game to the consumers.
And Arye?
Yeah, so Melon makes an EEG headband that monitors activity from the prefrontal cortex, connects via Bluetooth to a mobile app that helps you track how your behaviors, environments, and activities are affecting your mental state. And as a company, our mission is really to turn the invisible activity of the mind visible and meaningful in day-to-day life, and we're really just interested in those pieces of technology that we can build that help do that for the consumer.
And I founded Puzzlebox in 2004. We started as a rapid prototyping company, helping other people build their products from paper napkin through to production. Now we specialize in brain-computer interface and other biosensors, specifically controlling physical devices. So we made the Puzzlebox Orbit, a brain-controlled helicopter, which is used for attention exercises. That was based off of work we did with middle schools, originally helping them control Lego Mindstorms, programmable robots. And we decided to make a physical object that you could drive around by learning how to focus.
So Lat and Steve, I want to start with you because I think both of your products, the Orbit and Throw Trucks with Your Mind, kind of play to a collective fascination that goes back to anyone who probably at an inappropriate age watched Carrie or something like that. This idea of telekinesis or having that kind of power.
For me, it was Star Wars.
It was Star Wars? Oh yeah, or the Force. I saw Star Wars first too, but it's the power fantasy inside of Carrie that really struck home. Was that kind of was that what incentivized you to start to pursue this, or was it something that you kind of discovered, that you're playing into that fantasy, from some other inspiration?
Well, Well, it started off when I saw Star Wars when I was six, and I have wanted to be a Jedi ever since. And then when I was 13, I did neurofeedback therapy for my ADD, and what I took away from it was not that it was this great alternative therapy to the disorder that didn't require medication, but that it was so cool and that I needed to use it to make the ultimate Star Wars game. And then a decade ago, Neurosky had this demo with the Half-Life 2 engine, and where you could push things around with your focus, lift things with your calm, and I saw so much potential for this. Nothing came of that, and so when they released their commercial headset 3 years ago, $400, I immediately bought two and started development, because I felt that $100 price point for the peripheral was the point where it was actually commercially viable.
And Steve, you said you were working with sort of fifth graders, and I'm an adult and I get all giddy with the idea of controlling something with my brain. I imagine a 10-year-old that could solve all of life's problems. I mean, were you also sort of playing into that fantasy?
Yeah, I'd say obviously Star Wars was influential early on. I got involved with brain-computer interface around 2004, 2005. I saw a study by the Wadsworth Institute over in Albany, New York. And they had published a paper which got picked up by the BBC, and I saw it on Slashdot. Basically, they were showing a target, which was, there's 8 targets all around the circle on a screen, and a person was manipulating a cursor to hit those targets as they appeared randomly. And they were able to sort of steer that cursor within, say, 2 seconds and hit any of those corners of the screen. And I was only vaguely aware of EEG at the time. I thought it was fantastic that you could do this with non-invasive surgery. And I wanted to get involved immediately, but at the time you're looking at a good maybe 50 grand for the hardware. It was completely out of reach. Fast forward a couple years, I saw people like Neurosky and Emotive coming out early on with consumer-grade EEG headsets, immediately want to get involved. But as it turns out, the areas of the brain that are responsible for being able to do that sort of control, we still haven't seen in the consumer space yet. So working with the prefrontal cortex, which is a great place to start because easy access over the forehead, the algorithms that you could get, that you could use at the time, attention and meditation, the primary two, it was a matter of going, okay, well, if this is what I have, what can I do with this? And I had already worked with the programmable Legos from college. We did artificial intelligence courses with them. And after college, I worked briefly for a private elementary school, which was involved with First Lego League. So that's where kids meet after school, and they take on programming projects. There's international competitions, tens of thousands of students all around the world. And I knew they already had these kits. So I said, hey, I went back to the teachers and said, how about we do a program where we'll take the kids who already know how to program the robots, and we'll add this EEG metric to them. And they were all for it, and we had a great time doing it.
And Stanley, obviously from sort of your position, you get to see a lot of people kind of playing around in this space and with your product. Do you see kind of something that's universal? I mean, are they all kind of playing off that innate novelty of having some sense of control using your brain? Are you seeing sort of more diversity there?
What we see is a trend over the past, I would say, 5-6 years. Consumers are converging into a simpler platform. They want it simple, they want it fast, and they want it cheap. Nothing too complicated to learn and all that. You don't want to read a user manual or something like that. So we continue to strive for the simplest form factor, maybe down to just one sensor, one data point. That's limited by its nature, but how many, a lot of our experience says how many people actually have the need to do certain controls, in many different forms, and it takes 15 minutes to learn or 20 minutes to learn. The answer is not everybody, especially, maybe in this room, a lot of you are willing to do that because we're all in this field, but a lot of the consumers who are paying hard-earned cash, they don't really care how they get to experience it, as long as they get to experience a portion of it. And that's why we advocate the simplest form factor, the lowest cost, and be creative on the game side. That's why our business model is really collaborating with all your game developers out there. And we do have an excellent sales channel to push those for these good games. And in fact, today we have several new ones that showing in our booth. And some of them are actually quite good. I risk, problems or mentioning some of these games, hoping that I have to be fair with everybody. So,
Well, are you
was-
seeing kind of a sense that you're really seeing kind of full-fledged games, kind of what might be comparable, if not something you would get as a AAA game on a console, but something you might be playing on a computer, that they're exploring sort of this new space of control, but you're still getting sort of a game that isn't just resting on the novelty of how you're interacting with it?
Yeah, so for example, the game that we're showing today, one of the games, is called Mindlight. And it's based on over 20 years of research by Plays Institute in the Netherlands. And they spent the past 4 years writing this game. And it takes about 3 to 5 hours to play, depending on how good you are. And it's a game to teach children how to confront their fear. And if you're afraid of speaking in the public like this, you may want to play that game for a few hours, and you may become better. Things like that, more of assistive technology, and use biofeedback to help you perform better. And you can probably plot a performance curve so you can see a gradual improvement, sometimes rapid improvement. Those are pretty popular. ADD and ADHD treatment, we have another game called Focus Pocus that has been on since last year, and it was developed by Australian university and doctors, and now it's worldwide ready. And it takes 21 days to play, believe it or not, if you take 1 hour a day session, and that's a cloud computing type of technology. Again, it plots your performance and it helps you improve. So we see a lot of these mental improvement games that's doing well, and that's coming online. But I'm hoping to see more of an entertainment side as well as we improve the technology. So for example, I brought over, this is the first time ever anywhere in the world, this is one of the headsets that we're building right now. It simplifies things, and it's got a sensor inside, and the module pops out, so there are a lot of improvements compared to our existing headsets. We're constantly researching and building, engineering these hardware so that our developers can leverage these advantages.
I mean, that's something I definitely want to come back to, is sort of the
Sure.
form and aesthetics of these devices.
You say that there are no AAA games for this right now? I'm working on that.
All right, good. And that's something I want to come back to as well. But I do not want to forget about Arye over here with Melon. Now, you kind of approach this, from the outset, not from an entertainment point of view, but regardless, you need to still have some degree of, for lack of a better word, gamification to be able to, sort of work with, the player as they deal with, meditative states and other things like that.
Yeah, so for us, we approached it from insight, and from understanding yourself better using this, instead of earning points in a game, or instead of actually playing something where the outcome is built into the application that you're using. This is about learning about yourself, getting insights into how this technology can show you your mental state, how it can show you your focus, and how it's affected by your environment and behaviors. But there is a software side to it. There is an interface. There's something people have to interact with. And so through that, I think we still need to make it beautiful. We still need to make it engaging. And we still need to take that experience and make it something that people want to do day to day. And I think that's where it still gets into this entertainment side. It still needs to be human and engaging and something people want to do day in and day out. But a large part of that for us is not just the end result, but actually the process that you're going through while you're using it to get insight into day-to-day life.
And one of the games that you have requires sort of focus as you watch sort of origami get folded. But what I find so interesting about that is you have you're not touching the screen, you're not touching a keyboard. It really, there's only one interface, and it really is your mind, and that's quite ambitious, and I would say quite risky.
Yeah, so the panel's talked a little bit so far about neurofeedback, and that is kind of part of the inspiration for this, which is really using the device, the sensor, as the controller of the game, and as the feedback for what you're doing, and not trying to overcomplicate the interface, but really just as you focus more, the folds occur. The more folds in the creature, the harder the level, the more you have to maintain focus throughout completing that creature. And for us, the other thing really with the origami that inspired it was, how do we make something that both has a refinement and beauty to it, which origami definitely has, as well as something that's fun and you just kind of want to be a part of, which is creating cool new creatures, using your mental state as the input to create that.
And there is something already kind of meditative about origami in the first place, so it seems like a very appropriate fit.
Totally. So yeah, that was a part of it. I mean, it is that refinement and that precision that it takes, and I think for us, that is kind of what we look for as we're developing it, which is making it human and something that you could already understand, kind of like connects with that experience. So the precision that it takes to create origami feels very related to focus. And if that's what we're talking about in the application, that's what we want people to relate to when they're interacting with it.
So, Steve, in the process of making the orbit, once again, I think conceptually, it's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Over the time that it took to actually get to your finished product, I mean, what were the challenges? I mean, what did you end up with? How close in relation to what you envisioned in the beginning was it?
Well, the original form factor for the orbit came from a 1985 movie called Real Genius with Val Kilmer, and he makes a little helicopter and a ball. So we actually set out wanting to do that, and we were actually able to achieve that pretty quickly. The biggest limiting factor for us was the nature of the helicopter. In order to get it cheap enough that we could produce it on a massive scale, we had to target a pretty low-end technology. So our helicopter is based on infrared, which means it's one-way communication. So there's no logic on the helicopter itself. It's not like a Parrot drone that can self-hover and so forth. We don't have those tools. So when we're working with EEG, where the algorithms that we're using only give you one direction to control, whether it's flight or no flight, we're able to tap into, say, the tilting sensors from the tablet as a way to steer. Right now, we're actually working on, we have a student working this summer who's going to do some augmented reality stuff. Basically, if you take something called a horror classifier, which is used for things like face detection, you take 1,000 images of someone's face, or in this case, the helicopter, and 1,000 images without it, you throw a horror classifier at it, and it starts to work out what the thing is that you're looking for looks like. Out of that, you can get a bounding box. So what we're doing now is we're setting it up so that you can hold your phone out, point it at the orbit, and it can figure out where in the frame the helicopter is, and if it's too low, it can increase the throttle, and if it's drifting off to the side, it can make it turn the other direction. So we're getting to a point where we're reverse engineering a bit of self-hover using the camera in this sort of roundabout way, just so that the helicopter, now that it's hovering, we can get more degrees of control just by saying, you're concentrating, it's going to spin to the right, or if you're meditating, it might go left, or both to go forward, something like that. So we're trying to adapt. How can you get access to these other degrees of control until the point where the headsets catch up and you start covering the sensory motor cortex and you start covering other areas of the brain that will allow you to directly control the helicopter in the air.
And Lat, in the process of making throw trucks with your mind, clearly the name states the goal that you wanted to accomplish with the finished game, but I'm curious.
Actually, in the focus testing of this, when it was still a mod for Unreal Tournament 3, we found that people didn't care about what objects they could throw, so they only wanted to throw the biggest, heaviest thing at people, even if they weren't actually focused enough to throw it at them.
Throw boulders with my mind.
So that was just, so trucks are the biggest, heaviest thing, and that was just the working title of the game. And we weren't able to come up with a better name.
Well, what I was getting at, and albeit in a humorous route, did you have the risk of ending up with like sort of throw trucks with your hands? I mean, was it something, or I'm sorry, drive trucks with your hands? That the challenge of actually getting that focus to be able to work with the physics inside the game to actually propel this object in a virtual space. I mean, it sounds awesome in concept, but it sounds quite ambitious in execution.
Well, actually, when we were, I did 2 years of coffee shop-driven development. And I just kept turning to random people in the coffee shop and saying, "Excuse me, would you like to throw a truck with your mind?" And the reaction was always overwhelmingly positive. And I, to date, I've demoed the game for over 1,700 people, and I have only had one person who was not able to throw the truck.
Now, was that, was it that consistent from inception, or was there some struggle in the earlier, points of development?
It was that consistent from conception, and as soon as I initially calibrated it, so that it required high but not maximum level focus, everyone was able to do it. It took some people longer. The longest case was one friend of mine who has severe ADD, and it took him 15 minutes, and the only way he was able to get his focus high enough to throw the truck was by computing prime numbers in his head. It didn't work until he got above 51. Mind you, this is computing, not reciting. But afterwards, he recognized what the focus mechanism in his brain was and was able to re-engage it on demand afterwards.
Now, what you are attempting to do with this, as you said, you were kind of using it as an Unreal Tournament 3 mod, is that correct?
That was what it started off as. Now it's its own standalone game.
So you're also trying to actually, I think of everyone here, trying to get a proper game out of this. So now you have the mechanic down. Were there any challenges to then try to formulate a game that you could sort of stay with for an extended period of time all around that core mechanic?
Well, that was where the 2 years of coffee shop-driven development saved me. But there were a lot of things in the original design that had to be scrapped. For example, when the game first started off, I had a power where if you aimed at someone and focused hard enough, their head would explode, because that's the kind of juvenile thing I come up with on the first try. Turns out that is boring. Never saw that coming.
Scanners is boring. You just broke my heart right here, but go on, Lat.
It turned the gameplay into look at the person you want to die until they die. Which describes every modern shooter, and if you're going to put this small-scale indie title next to Modern Warfare, people are just going to play Modern Warfare.
So you really had to distinguish this game from other things from a first-person point of view that are already out there on the market.
But also, while it had novelty value that people loved, after 15 minutes they get bored. So as an experiment into this problem of people getting bored after 15 minutes, I took out that power, made it so your powers went right through other players. And suddenly, instead of looking at the person you want to die until they die, you had to be clever and use the environment to destroy your enemies. And people went from getting bored after 15 minutes to having to stop after playing for an hour because they were mentally exhausted. And it's just the constant iteration.
And it really does open up avenues of discovery for the player, because you're not just doing one thing. You're trying to figure out how much more you can manipulate.
Oh yeah, people like having more options in games. But in a way where they can ignore certain options.
And Stanley, obviously his ease at actually getting the core technique to actually work inside the game is obviously a tribute to your technology. But you were mentioning earlier that you're not seeing a lot that is more on the entertainment side as Lat's game is. Is that because people just are more focused on something that has sort of a wellness approach, or are you seeing that there are challenges beyond just kind of getting the technology to work to actually then turn that into a fun and engaging and entertaining experience?
Well, there are challenges that we have to face. First of all, Lat just right before this panel told me you gotta boost the battery power. It has to go all day because some people would want to play this all day, and sometimes the headsets will stop working, run out of battery when you're starting to challenge each other, with the game. And those are the feedback that we take to heart and try to improve, and that's why we every year or so we come out with a new headset or wearable gear. What I wear here is a smartwatch that we built, and we try to build assistive technology as well, that leveraging our sensor to work in conjunction with all these different technologies so that the total gaming experience is a plus. But I really salute Lat, and as well Clarity, and also NeuroMage, the game that's demoing in our booth, for example. If you haven't seen it, the graphics is just awesome. And they're very creative. They take very limited amount of, controllability or features, and they turn them into a wonderful experience. And that's very key. So creativity is one thing, but we need to continue. We as a company and hardware platform provider need to continue to provide easier and easier access to human signals so our game developers can leverage these signals and provide better experience for the community.
I'd also like to weigh in on the entertainment side. There is a certain level of visual fidelity that is just expected from games unless unless you are good enough to make Thomas Was Alone. And that's expensive and time-consuming. The art assets that you see in Throw Trucks with Your Mind took a full year of development to produce, and that's with a team of can't talk today.
A team of 5 or a team of 4?
Team of 4 full-time artists working on it.
Wow. And it was a full year to get to just.
Yeah, and these are people whom, well, this would not have gotten done in a year, or if it weren't all of our full-time jobs, and these are all people for whom, if they don't get paid, they don't eat.
Right.
And that's just not sustainable. So it's expensive to make a proper entertainment game.
I think, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges. One of the things I definitely want to touch on before the end of this conversation is whether or not you sort of see bigger players in the gaming space willing to kind of come to this type of technology. But first, Arye, in terms of making your game, once again, the origami sounds really simple. I'm curious if there's an interesting tale about how you were able to make a no-touch game controlled with your mind, if that was something that was able to be enacted right from the outset, if there had to be some iteration through it.
Yeah, so we're definitely not a gaming company, and I think, but we did understand that there could be an engaging experience with this origami section within our application. I think the hard thing about EEG in a gaming setting that I think has been touched on, and Lat nailed it, but I think where it's hard is the feedback. So EEG is a real-time measurement. It's an awesome real-time measurement of the brain. There is a lot of noise that can be seen in the data, and gaming needs that instantaneous feedback to feel real and to feel like you do something and it happens and you have this awesome ongoing experience that feels kind of like instantaneous based on your behavior. And I think it's hard to get EEG to be that instantaneous awesome feedback. And I think for us, the origami section of the application was, can you see progress over time? Can you fold different creatures? Can you use different focus techniques that you're learning through our application, like deep breathing or other exercises, and apply it to this to perform better within this game? And it's kind of a testing bed. I think one of the things we're all working towards is getting that real-time feedback, and I think that's something I'm always impressed by when people can do it with EEG, but I think is a tricky part of creating these entertainment systems around the technology that we're all using, because you don't want it to feel lagging. You don't want it to feel like it's not responding to the way you feel, because there's a subjective element to all of this as well that I think plays largely into a great experience. And so we wanted to build something that understood all that and also promoted the principles of Melon around understanding yourself better through using the game.
And Steve, I guess definitely the orbit doesn't have to deal with kind of that strange subjective world of digital feedback. You have a physical object that is physically doing what it's set out to do, but I guess at the same time, there's limitations, as you pointed out, in terms of that control. It's almost that we get to this point of reality, even in reality, but then people start to notice if it falls just even the most tiny bit short. I mean, where do you see sort of these next steps with the promise of sort of what the orbit can do, and this idea of actually controlling physical objects with your mind?
So I guess what we're trying to accomplish is to show that there's demand for the more advanced ways of interfacing with the brain. And I think Stanley mentioned earlier that there's additional challenge to that. It's not just a matter of coverage, it's a matter of training. So for example, when I was talking earlier about being able to steer a mouse cursor in 2 dimensions, or even now you can do it in 3 dimensions, the studies have their graduate students going through 20 to 30 hours of training in order to achieve proficiency. And that's just not feasible for an entertainment application. No one's going to sit through 20 to 30 hours of training before they can play the thing effectively. So
that sounds like the worst tutorial ever.
yeah. So there's a whole other set of challenges, and even first of all, I think with better algorithms, you'll be able to accomplish quite a bit of that. And it's still going to be a couple of years before the consumer headsets are even covering that area, just because there's so many challenges with different styles of hair, thickness of hair products, head sizes. You have challenges where the actual regions of the brain they don't exactly drift, but they vary from person to person. If you're looking for CZ, which is dead center at the top of the head, that usually controls your feet when you tap your feet. It might be off to the side a little bit because if you imagine a brain is sort of wrinkled and folded. So if you were to take everyone's brain sort of laid out flat and picture little antennas sticking straight up that are transmitting the data that you're looking for, that's all fine and good. Everyone's pretty much the same, but different size of heads and different shapes of the skull require that the brain folds in different ways. You can picture those transmitters folding with the brain and sort of pointing to different directions. So there's not even just making sure that you can cover over the hair and get through the hair, it's making sure that for you, that the sensor's in exactly the right location and so on. So those are all kinds of problems that not only that we have to deal with, but anyone who's trying to do a video game where they're trying to replace a joystick with brain control, I think they're going to have lots of problems. If you think about it, our hands have evolved over thousands of years to become very, very proficient and dexterous, and you can pick up a joystick and sort of work out very quickly, how the controls work, especially after successive console generations. If you ever have a game where you're trying to 100% replace the joystick with the mind, it's better to stick with the joystick. Find something else. Find another element of control. Maybe if it's a Call of Duty style game, make it so that you're telling your squadron where to go, or you're doing something else besides the direct control, because it's going to be too hard. It's going to be too frustrating for your general casual user.
This brings to let's go ahead and talk about trying to bring this to the mass market. I think we know we have the objects out there, but as someone who's living in San Francisco right now, and just how Google Glass has become the most culturally divisive thing that has been occurring in 2014. Do you think there is a mass market that's ready for this wearable tech? That I don't want to say that creep factor, because I don't think it's really there. It's not looking at other people, but it is that kind of new way that you're seeing another person engage with technology that seems to have a lot of people feeling quite averse. Stanley, is this something that you've considered? Obviously, what you showed earlier is quite aesthetically pleasing, but nonetheless, it's new and it's disruptive.
Right. So there's this very important thing called fashion. So for example, even though this is one of the slimmest things I've seen, that doesn't make me look very good compared to all of you out there, right? But it is.
If you had a silver suit on, it'd be all good.
It is comfortable.
Clearly, we need silver suits back.
Yes, it is comfortable, but it's still a challenge to look at people wearing Google Glass or this type of thing on a constant daily basis. Those are basically more of a social challenge than a physical technology challenge. We can achieve the technology, but would that be socially accepted? Maybe in San Francisco it's a social norm, but not in most of the cities I visit. But watches, wrist wearables are okay. For example, this again.
Well, the What's Game kind of look like an existing, device for the past few hundred years.
And it can be disguised as a watch, but it has a lot more functions for gaming and to assist this piece, for example, so that I commend what Steve just said earlier. It is. You don't want to use it as a joystick, but you still have emotions. And besides motor skills, we have emotions, and you can use our motor skills with our hands and use our emotions as emotions, and that would be a better experience if you use it in conjunction with each other. And so what I see is the fashion side of things will enable the wearables, the Google Glass type of things moving forward. Now, if I could just plead to Google and make it a little more better looking, not lopsided and better looking, perhaps that'll catch on, but it's hard for me to say right now.
Well, and then also, and this I want to open up to all of you, as someone who's watched the game industry, that except for maybe a couple of years, someone mentioned it earlier when the Rumble tech finally emerged, and you could slap it into the N64 controller. Aftermarket peripherals for consoles, you're at a much lower percentage of what that install base is. It's very tough to get that many people to buy it, and that strikes me as kind of, especially if we're looking at this to move into entertainment, where at least you're going to want it to work with games available on Steam, much less something that may be on an Xbox One or on a PlayStation 4. I mean, do you guys kind of see enough of an appetite for something like this that you could put these things into production and that you would have an install base to sell your software to?
I find there's a tremendous appetite for it. once they know and understand that it exists, because right now I'm met with a lot of skepticism about this until people play it. It's like, oh my God, why hasn't anyone made this before?
Now, how do you, and Stanley, I guess you're probably in that best position. I mean, you have one of the most high-profile sort of devices that perform this function. How do you reach an audience that isn't the early adopter, that aren't the attendees here at the NeuroGaming conference?
It depends on the questions they ask. Some of them come very well armed with good list of questions. You know they're getting to some place and they're game.
How about the ones that don't know this exists? Those are the ones you really want to get to.
Yeah, so you have to talk their language, right? So some people who, actually I didn't encounter anybody here today that don't know anything about NeuroGaming or...
They would have stumbled into the wrong room. It's NeuroGaming.
Unless they're here to
What's
steal
the food
the
like?
drinks and cookies out there. But when I'm visiting a normal setting or a normal gaming conference or even at CES this year, we do encounter a lot of people who actually don't know anything about NeuroGaming. So for them, it's a brand new experience. When people are experiencing something new, my advice to everybody here is, and most people out there are going to experience this as something new, is you don't give them too much, because you have to take it easy on people who are experiencing new experience. For example, our very first product was a joint collaboration with Star Wars franchise. Back in 2009, the Star Wars Force Trainer. It was the Force, and you just float a ping pong ball through a tube. That was good enough for the Star Wars fans. They just want to experience that force. And we even made it difficult with 3 levels so that you can adjust your level depending on how hard you focus. And that was all it took to excite the crowd. And you got to train the market to get people get used to it. And then the next year we had the Mattel Mindflex, where it was going to be a Harry Potter Quidditch field, by the way. And they decided, no, we don't want to pay Harry Potter 25%. Royalty, just go straight with the Mindflex name. And then this time you have 2-dimensional movements, and then it catches on fire. And then you will go to the very next year with 2-player mode. So things get improved a little bit at a time, and that's how consumers adapt to it. And I believe we're at the beginning of that. And I'll give you another example. Today, if I buy a smartphone, like an iPhone that I don't have to read anything and I can use it. But back in the late 80s, when I first entered the workforce, I had a desk phone. At that time, if you gave me an iPhone, I wouldn't know how to use it because I wasn't market trained. But from that point, I went to core phone, cordless phone, PDAs, folded phones, all the way to now smartphone. And every step of the way is really a minor step, not a big giant leap. So in this industry, we have to take it easy on the people who are not familiar with this technology.
You have to allow for some cultural adjustment. You
Correct.
can't just shock people with like, hey, and now we're going to just change everything, and you're doing it with your mind.
Exactly.
Have fun.
Exactly.
Arye, you, I think, are in the beneficial position where you're able to present sort of Melon to a more specialized and aware audience, because you are really kind of focusing on wellness and mental health. I mean, I'm curious sort of your perspective looking at something like entertainment. I mean, you kind of have a way to already start addressing, maybe not as broad, but a more informed and more particular, and an audience that is looking for your services.
Yeah, so we're extremely excited about the people looking for what we're doing and kind of the feedback we've gotten and how excited people are. Lumosity has a booth here, and they've done an awesome job showing people's interest in the kind of mental wellness and mental health that we're talking about. And so I think that's great. From the entertainment side, it's not something I can speak to so much, because we really do have kind of the value we're trying to provide and kind of the value proposition we're putting out there. But I think I do see from the entertainment side, it's similar in the sense that it's not just about the sensors, it's not just about the technology and pitching that, because that is obviously less understandable. It's really about the about the value you can add, about the insights you can give, and it's about what you can provide, which is more human and more understandable. There's not as much education if you're talking about what you're giving someone as opposed to here's this thing that's doing it. It's not the mechanisms, it's the outcome.
Well, I do wonder after what Stanley was talking about, it's kind of like those gradual steps to ease people into something that is conceptually so kind of jarring. Yeah. If by predicating it initially on something that is healthy and well-meaning. And Steve, I mean, that's where I think you kind of perfectly straddle. I mean, you did design something that's supposed to deal with attention issues in 10-year-olds, but you're still controlling a helicopter with your mind. And that if I'm curious if you think that's kind of maybe where that sweet spot is going to have to be initially before it goes full-bore entertainment.
Well, I think it's a bit of a balance. I mean, on one hand, you have the gimmick factor, and there's nothing wrong with a good gimmick if it's executed well. But on the other hand, you need the meat behind it. You actually have something there after you've bought the thing and you've played with it twice. So why are you going to keep on coming back? So we did simple things like adding gamification, like high scores, basically. Depending on the difficulty level that you set, you can set it to trigger at pretty much any level, but you don't start getting any points until you have it past a certain threshold. And then every percentage point after that, you start getting multipliers. So when you go to play with it, you can decide, well, what's my target for today? How high do I think I can score, and so forth. And just basic things like that give someone a reason to do it a second time. That said, with our next series of products, we'll be announcing something later this month. We're moving more towards the mindfulness area. We're moving in the direction where, yeah, it's brain controlled, and yeah, you're able to do all these things, but really the idea is to get technology out of the way. So we're looking to develop good habits based around mindfulness. You want something where you put it on, you do your daily practice, and you're not even paying attention to the fact that you have something on your head. You don't want to even be aware of that. So sell it, sure, by using brain controlled, but you still got to deliver.
The final big question, because Convergence was in this title, but I believe you're interested in VR and you have some interest in AR, but you guys are really kind of primarily working in this EEG space. But going back to actually the very first panel of the day today, there were cautions that where we have VR here, AR here, and we have EEG here, and we have eye tracking over here, and then motion tracking, that if we silo all of this, even because there's a benefit of bringing them all together into a collective experience, that can these products really survive on their own, or do we actually need sort of a physical convergence of kind of the Uber helmet that kind of does everything all at once? Is that something that you think is just inevitable and essential down the road? Stanley, because you have one of these products, I would like you to go first.
Well, my point of view, and based on what I have been seeing in the market, is that we have lived years and years putting all our technology, for example, on a PC or a laptop, and then moving on to our mobile devices. We surround these things with gadgets. But after that is more of a wearable technology. In my opinion, they'll break up. So how many people carry around a cell phone, a smartphone, that actually have functions you never use? A lot of us do that. Whether you want the function or not, you have to buy it. But in the wearable space, you actually can pick and choose. It's like picking the song out of a CD that only that song you want, and you wear those things. So I believe all these different technologies can play a role. It depends on your needs, your personal needs. And when it comes to wearable, it's very personal.
But for the developer, if they were to do something that used more than one, if it's more than EEG, it's EEG and it's VR, they have to kind of guess, like, okay, how many people have sort of the crossover devices that are compatible together? I mean, you would have to admit that, if it isn't all in one place, it may kind of slow down the process of innovation and development.
Correct, and that's why, the standardizing the operating system is very important. Even though these different mobile devices all have different features, perhaps they should all be either converging on iOS or Android, and that's why Microsoft is trying so hard to be a part of that, because they see, and I think everybody sees, not just them, that mobile is about wearable in the future, and the features that the technology will desegregate from the mobile phone or the pads into something we wear easily, right? And these things all have to have some sort of a common denominator, so some apps can be moved from here to there and communicate with each other.
Arye, do you see the future where just one big thing sticks on your head and now you're folding origami like a badass and you're never going to stop?
I think what we can look for is there common computing between all the devices? Is there a common computing power? Right now, it's our mobile phones in most cases. And can that let information flow more easily? I don't, in the future, see all of it cramming into one device, but can we make it stream together more seamlessly? And what can that mean for more intelligent experiences?
And Lat, I mean, I still have this fantasy of a David Cronenberg-inspired pulsating, undulating thing that I have in my head to throw trucks with my mind. Do you see that as a viable possibility down the line?
It's gonna be a while. As it stands, we're incorporating devices as it makes sense. Like, we're going to make Oculus Rift work with throw trucks with their mind because it's awesome. Not so much because it's useful.
All right.
Oh.
And Steve, I think it's funny because of the nature of what the orbit does. I mean, the minute you think about putting on sort of a VR headset or anything that's even eye tracking, I mean, it gets so close to sort of like, you're suddenly going to have a toy called Drone Strike. But I have to imagine that it has at least crossed your mind as a viable option. Is it something that you see is going to become an essential down the road?
I got to say, Oculus is probably the last thing that we'll end up doing because we sort of specialize in physical objects being manipulated and so on. But that said, to your earlier point, I do think we're going to see a lot of convergence of these different biosensors specifically. I mean, 10 years ago, I might have had a Nokia feature phone and a camera and an iPod and, half a dozen other. GPS would be a separate device as well. And all these things that converge into the phone, whether or not you're going to be using the GPS all the time or what have you. I think you're going to start to see the convergence is going to be based on the physical locations and the biometrics you can pull from them. So definitely in the watches, you're not going to have one watch doing heart rate, another one doing blood pressure, or another one doing GSR, galvanic skin response. You're going to have one watch that has all those sensors. And you might be monitoring all that data all the time, and it's not until that you have like a heart palpitation while you're running that you're going to actually go back and look at the data. Same thing with Google Glass. There's no reason why Glass wouldn't or shouldn't have an EEG sensor. You already have something over the head. You already have something in that general area. You're going all the way back to the ear so you can get a ground. There was, I think, Tom was talking earlier about getting heart rate measurements off of EEG. If you can get it clean, I don't know myself, but either way, you already have something over by the ear, and you're starting to see headphones these days that have heart rate sensors built into them. So I think it's going to be a question of what's the minimum amount of stuff that someone's going to be willing to wear on a regular basis, and what can you read from the points where that stuff touches the body? And I think you're going to see all the sensors get integrated because they'll get cheap over time. It might take a little while, but you'll see it.
And then hopefully some fashion sense will be happening right along with it, as you pointed out quite elegantly, Stanley. Do we have any time for questions? Or okay, I think we have time for a couple of questions if there's anybody out there. Over here.
Thank you. My name is Nerissa Chu, representing CW Lab, and Stanley, this question is for you. I'm one of your customers. So I'd like to see, I'd like to see whether you would share your roadmap. You mentioned about your headset. Now it's getting really fashion, going in that direction. So how do you see your product being incorporated with mobile phone? And then I think Steve alluded to that, as well as Google Glass.
I guess I should take that answer since you addressed it to me. We actually, the biggest difference in the past year compared to all the previous years is I actually have to work with fashion industry people and get their opinion on what color, even the color of the material, which is nothing to do with technology. We're building in a cooperation with a customer on the wristband, and they want 5 colors or 7 colors, and they want a royal blue. What the heck is a royal blue? Right?
It's a darker blue.
Okay. Blue. I was gonna just give them any blue, but no. There's a lot of fashion elements into our design moving forward because, after all, we are targeting the consumer sector, and beyond the regular attendance here, normal attendance here, where people are willing to put on headsets, willing to put on gears and try them out simply because of the technology. That's a very small sliver of the population. You have to worry about what most people think. An average person out there, can they wear that? Are they willing to wear that out? So the roadmap, if you send me an email, I may have to share it with you privately. I can't just openly say it here. Involves with a lot of fashion designs, believe it or not, and we even work with fashion designers in several countries just to make sure when we localize it to that country, that color scheme does not offend the local population, or that look and shape doesn't do anything funny to the local population. But as far as technology goes, we do have a very strong set of technology coming out. I don't want to, I already show you one of them, but I don't want to risk of saying this prematurely, but for example, at CES, we're going to be debuting a very awesome technology that's nobody has seen before, and it's truly revolutionary. It will take a biosensing kind of technology up to the next level. So we do have a lot in our roadmap and plan, and we can only release that when we move forward and when we're ready to talk about it.
Just please say it's do the dishes with my mind. It will make me, it'll just change my life forever. I think we have time for at least one more question. Is anyone out there? Way in the back.
Wonder if you might be thinking about taking a page from what we saw with Google, where they've more likely partnered with companies that already sell things that people wear naturally. You're seeing stuff in the ski goggles. You see it with motorcycle helmets. I just Googled, is there anybody using baseball caps that are actually integrating EEG and other devices? So have you thought about just incorporating this into natural things that people are already willing to wear, and then make those the devices that people sport about?
I mean, I think it's an interesting question, Stanley. I'd love to hear from everyone here, but yeah, I mean, another way to get people to sort of adapt to this technology is to kind of bring it into what they're already comfortable with, rather than asking them to sort of take such a big aesthetic and, I guess, fashion leap.
Actually, that is exactly what we're doing. We are at the core a biosensor company, so these sensors we sell them just by these little sensors and chips, and we have. Or like bicycle helmets, just mentioned, we had 2 helmet companies already integrating them. One of them is going to work in New York City to track the bikers' data through the cloud, and they can map out, which areas tense and which areas just relax for riding, for example. And I believe that same project or similar project is going to go in Brazil as well. So yeah, this type of things are being built right now and have been successfully demonstrated. Even baby clothing, incorporating with biosensors that we built for them. There's a lot of smartwatches and wristbands that you saw at CES this year had our sensors in them. In fact, one of the winners, Jaber Rain, has our sensor right in the middle. So they are being built into these devices that you see them. It's just that I think the topic here is about gaming, not about those. But our sensors do go to a lot of places already.
Well, I think, Steve, this brings up something interesting for you. That, I mean, would you see kind of a future where maybe you would want to partner up with a Mattel, or sort of an established manufacturer? Because as you pointed out, trying to make that helicopter and keep the costs in check was something that you found to be the most challenging. Obviously, a large toy manufacturer has already kind of dealt with those problems, to say nothing of the fact that they already have IP that has an innate appeal.
I mean, I could see consulting with somebody. We've tried to pitch Puzzlebox as, we're not going to make the sensors, we're not going to make the headsets. That way we can work with everyone who does. Instead of making the PlayStation and the Xbox and the Wii, we want to make, Last of Us and Call of Duty and Mario. We want to make the reasons, the toys and devices, the reasons why people buy the headsets in the first place. Like, that's cool that you can do that stuff. And there's great, the Kickstarter videos and all the other sort of promotional stuff where people are moving lawnmowers around and all that sort of thing. That's great, but someone's actually got to go out and build that. So we're trying to work with people who are making the headsets and encourage them to, well, have you guys thought about putting stuff in other regions? One of the things that I think that we'll definitely see in the near future is, again, earlier I was talking about the sensory motor cortex, which is the strip of the brain that controls body movements, and that's the one that was used all the way back in 2004 for moving this cursor in 2D and now 3D. The sensory motor cortex runs from ear to ear straight across the top of your head. So you can see all of the, all the commercial opportunity in Beats headphones and all the rest. There's no reason why headphones shouldn't have sensors integrated with them. The only reason that it's a bit of a challenge is that, without getting too technical, when you don't just want those specific locations, you want something called a laplation, which means you want these 3 spots, but you also want sensors around those 3 spots so that you can do a bit of filtering, spatial filtering. But in any case, yeah, I think that you're going to see sensors maybe something, say, the open BCI design, where people will be able to put the sensors wherever they decide. So I think they have a 3D printed sort of a skeleton. And earlier I was talking about how the physical location where people exhibit some of these different signals varies from person to person. I could see, not just from a fashion perspective, but from a practicality perspective, having things customized and integrated so that when I put on my baseball cap, it already has the sensors aligned to the positions that are right for me.
And customization is probably one of the most key things when it comes to games. So I think that helps us bring it back to the topic. And to end this session, I would like to, everyone, please give a round of applause for this wonderful panel. Lat, Stanley, Arye, and Steve. You guys, thank you very much. It was absolutely fascinating.